From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. And I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gurnosky. So glad to be with you live back on radio, podcast, video stream, and our website, aneighborschoice.com. We continue to integrate the world of science, medicine, culture, politics, philosophy, economics, anthropology, history, all these topics together for a wild ride through the news. Nobody else does it like this. That's why this program has become such a special part for so many people's conversations around the world. Not because of me, but because of the ideas that we are fighting for together. The ideas that toxic groupthink cannot hold us back if we unite together based on a love of personhood, based on a love of nonviolence and creativity, and a humility to recognize the blind spots that we all have because of our shared humanity. That's a problem in our society today, is an arrogant discourse. An arrogant discourse has pervaded the land for so long. This did not happen because somebody was elected or whatever. It has nothing to do with elections. Elections are a small side effect of something that's been holding us back, which is an arrogant discourse. An arrogant discourse that does not recognize what we don't know, that does not show a kind of respect for the fact that we may not know everything we say we know, right? So much of our conversations in our society have had a kind of arrogance to what we expect to be, ascertainable or understandable with our scientific, fields. What I mean by that is we have a arrogant epistemology. We have an ignorant epistemology. And epistemology is simply the study, of how we know what we know, right? How do we know what we know is true? How do we know which scientific theory is to be given credibility or not, right? That's what I want to talk to you about at this first part of our program. We'll get into the news, and boy, there's a lot of news, but we always want to look for what we can learn from the news, right? We want to look at the big picture and not just get stuck on the details about who's in and who's out today. That's so boring, and we don't want to waste our time with that. That's what 10,000 parrot programs talk about every day. This person did this person said that person said this person's a bad guy, this person's a good guy. I'm so tired of that stuff. And we all fall into it. We all get, drawn into the drama, the lunchroom drama, I call it, of politics, right? And that's not to say that, there's no time at all for that. But there is a real lack of conversations about epistemology. And I often talk about mimesis, which is this insight that we desire the things that our neighbors desire. And that includes being right and being perceived as accurate in our conceptions of the world, including our scientific theories. And so when we have a faulty epistemology, which puts way too much faith in the prestige of so-called experts, rather than actually looking at the rigorous scientific evidence that they're presenting for their claims, we make a lot of blunders. And this virology story is an epic example of that. But as you know, if you've been listening to A Neighbor's Choice for some time, we have been talking about the mimetic distortions of our epistemology for some time. We have been talking about how mimesis, or rather groupthink, if you want to use a more common term, but doesn't quite give it the fullness of what I'm trying to capture, but we can use groupthink if you prefer, that groupthink has clouded the judgment and created a sacred cow aura around some of the most prestigious fields of knowledge today, including physics. For example, let me give you an example. This UFO story, right? The UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, is the politically correct term for UFOs. that the government has tried to push, right? This narrative, this brand. This story, we have not talked about it, about the actual argument. And I was going to talk about it on a previous episode. We didn't get to it. So I'm going to talk about it now as an illustration. On this program we're coming up on 3 years of doing this radio broadcast. In July, the week of July 4th, will be our 3rd year of doing FM, AM radio broadcasting on A Neighbor's Choice. But we have been talking about, Dr. Yu, my chief science advisor and physicist, we have been talking about how if we challenge some of the presumptions of standard model physics, if we challenge quantum physics, if we challenge relativity by looking at what makes sense with real physical observation and logic, we might come out with a more consistent, credible, unified theory of both the small subatomic particle world as well as the macro scale cosmic world. And we have been talking about it and applying Dr. Yu's muon theory, his universal particle theory, that every particle is a composition, that every atom is a composition of different magnetic particles that have dipolar positive and negative poles. Now, we have made this, and we haven't pushed the theory so, front-loaded, but rather we have just used it as a map to look at science news and try to make sense of all the different stuff. And I think, and we can show you the receipts, that we've made a tremendous amount of predictions in so many different fields, even outside of physics, using our understanding of physics that Occam's razor gives the edge to, because it's this more simplest explanation as opposed to string theory, which you saw with our interview with Dr. Michio Kaku, or some of the other competing theories out there that ask for 67 dimensions, 40,000 particles, and the most bizarre things that don't make any sense and don't even have much evidence. But what they do have is mimetic prestige around them. They have folks that have proposed these ideas that have a certain mimetic prestige. Some of it because they're brilliant, and some of it is due to the fact that they're in the right place at the right time. They become media darlings. They become academic darlings. They play politics, what have you, whatever, and they become esteemed. And people don't want to be looking like they're criticizing these forefathers of a domain like physics, especially as rarefied as physics is. And so they don't want to challenge it. But we have been making a lot of predictions about what's possible in the physical world using Dr. Yu's theory, groundbreaking new physics that simplifies and unifies the physical forces, the physical laws, and the different particles into one particle, one law, one universe. And it's very elegant. And one of the things that we have spoken about from time to time is that when we see a story suggesting that things like an object having so-called anti-gravity propulsion, that with Dr. Yu's theory and his understanding that gravity is simply a manifestation of magnetism, that yes, theoretically, it's possible to have a repulsion as well. If you have attraction, gravity is not just an attractive force, but it can also have repulsion. And that's something that could be understood technologically. And he's described, and I'll leave it to him to describe how he gets to that point. But my point is now, there's this new discussion, this new narrative that's reaching a lot of momentum in the mainstream 60 Minutes, the legacy 20th century media, talking about the possibility that the Pentagon is going to be disclosing all this information about these UAPs, these UFOs. And again, we don't know what the actual case is about what those videos and eyewitnesses are actually seeing. But strictly on the physics level, we have been making a case that it is physically possible to have an anti-gravity type mechanism. That's not some kind of science fiction, but that's something that with our map of the physical universe makes sense that could be explored. Now, do we have the answer as to how to do that? I wouldn't say so. It's not something we've spent time investigating in that matter. But theoretically, based on Dr. Yu's explanations, he has made a case that such a thing could be real. Now, for so long, the standard explanation from physicists was this violates the laws of physics as we know it. And so that was supposed to shut down the conversation de facto that the high priest of our scientism had declared this is a violation of the sacred principle of the Trinity dogma, therefore it cannot happen, and we all were supposed to shut up. Well, now that's changed. They've changed the narrative now to say, well, now we can talk about it. It's as if these, 20th century top-down media outlets have said, okay, now you can have permission to talk about this, even though it still violates the old models of physics that those high priests were using as a way to dismiss such observations and eyewitness reports of these objects out of hand completely. And my point in all of this is just to illustrate that when we have the courage to challenge the things that we believe we know are for certain, that relativity and quantum physics and all these things are unassailable, you don't touch them. That's what Dr. Michio Kaku said when he came on the show. He said, you can submit a theory of everything, but you must admit that relativity is true and quantum physics is true in order for us to even consider publishing your work, because you must basically bow the knee to past scientists who have claims that have not, in my opinion, had enough evidence to make them unassailable. But because we have all of this mimetic groupthink energy and esteem and sacred aura that we place socially into holding up these ideas of past media giants and science giants, therefore, there's this inertia of social conformity pressure that disallows new ideas that make more sense, that have a simpler explanation from it being entertained. And that's what I want you to take in mind as we look at this story of this gain-of-function lab leak story that's making the rounds all over the media today, is that's another example of where we are asked to not speak about something until the official 20th century state-submitted media comes out and says, well, yeah, you can talk about it now. And it's like, you don't set the terms, okay? You guys represent the horse and buggy era of media. We're the 21st century media, and we're not going to allow people who are backwards looking to set the terms by trying to put all this social pressure of conformity baked in, preloaded, so that we can't raise these questions without fear of reprisal and ostracization. We have to overcome that social pressure because that's holding us back from 21st century science. I'm David Gornoski. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. We'll return in just a moment with more. David Gornoski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck on a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa. Not attorney spokeswoman.
Neighbor's Choice returns. So I want to look at some comments here. The big story of the day for a lot of folks is all these Fauci emails that have leaked. Now I want to be careful here, because I've been covering this story before it was cool. Now I wasn't the first guy to do it, and that's fine. I don't need to be first. That would be silly. We're just going to do it when we find it to be, something that has a lot of evidence. And that's when I got onto the train of looking at this story, there was enough evidence that caught my attention to make it a story to cover. But there is a tendency, of course, with anything political to always want to scapegoat. So now the mob is starting to turn against Fauci. And, he's going to have his hardcore followers that defend him. But it's very important that we understand that the state is a ruthless enterprise. And so if the state is pushing him out to let him get the heat, and then you want to say, okay, well, we've got rid of him, he's retiring or whatever, he's stepping down, that's not going to solve the problem. There's a fundamental problem that's completely consuming our ability to make sense of the world, and that is we continue to persist in relying on sacrifice. Now, I interview a lot of folks that I don't agree with, and I've interviewed communists and conservatives, nationalists and populists, socialists and libertarians, all folks that I just want to learn from people. I want to have conversations. I want to learn what not to think, and I want to learn what to think and learn how to balance paradox, right? I like having conversations. And so there's a lot of times that I have guests on and I let them speak, and I'm of the principle that you don't bring someone on and then try to be combative with them and make them look bad. That's boring, right? That's so 20th century passé. We've got to be interesting. We've got to be thoughtful here. And that means not doing the expected little clown show of trying to jump on people's cases if we think they're wrong. We want to hear people's perspectives. But I do think it's important that we really need to pay attention to this argument that I'm trying to present in all of my work in a subtle way and maybe sometimes more overt way, which is that sacrifice is at the heart of the state. And that sacrifice is this idea that we can use preemptive violence to exclude possible choices from being presented, or possible ideas, or possible actions, right? That's what government provides all the time, a monopoly on the use of violence, on the use of force. George Washington said, it's like government is force, it's like fire, right? It can get out of hand if not maintained and held back, right? This idea of force is just a modern explanation for sacrifice. And it's holding us back. Just like people used to do more primitive, vicious sacrificial institutions like witch hunting and heretic burning and so forth in order to try to make sense of the world, so too the state being held by sacrificial violence is holding us back from getting on to the proper way of understanding the world in a way that's more holistic, more healthy, more integrative, in terms of bringing everybody to the conversation. And we have to understand that sacrifice is really polluting our ability to know what's true about the world. These media outlets are so sycophantically, magnetically attracted, like flies to a carcass, to this withering statism religion. They're just flying around. They love it. They love being around it. And we have to be able to navigate this time carefully with wisdom and not get excited about, oh, we're going to fire Fauci. Yeah, fire Fauci and investigate whatever he knew. But he is not the problem. He is, again, a symptom of a structural faith that we have put into being for a long time, which is this top-down approach. Government should run science. Government should pick and choose winners, and they don't know what they don't know. They lack epistemological humility. That's what I'm trying to emphasize in this story here, is that and it's something that if we become aware of our anthropology, thanks to the insights disclosed to us in the gospel technology of Jesus, we can then be able to be more discerning of fake news and fake science and scientism and so forth. And at the same time, be discerning of the populist doubles of that, right? That there's these populist conspiracies and other things that are also wrong, but we have this binary approach, unfortunately, that once we say, hey, I don't buy the media lying to me about that the gain of function thing is not to be explored, the gain of function lab leak hypothesis is not allowed to be explored, so therefore I'll just buy into whatever I see on some blog. That's the tendency that makes us get into mistakes, right? It's much harder to use discernment and paradox to kind of navigate the nonsense on both sides, both the powerful side and the populist side that is just, grasping for answers. And all of that can be done when we understand the mimetic social pressures that underpin so many of the assumptions that people make. It's like people want to believe in something and they will fight tooth and nail for it. So if I challenge the foundation, Dr. You and I challenge the foundations of the Standard Model, we challenge quantum physics fundamentally, we challenge relativity fundamentally, then you'll get somebody on here who will tell me, well, that means you've got to believe in the electric universe theory. And it's like, okay, well, there might be something to look at, okay. But then you see that it's a partisan thing on that side too. So there's groupthink and tribalism that entrenches itself around there too, that they'll fight to the death they're right. At the end of the day, what's right is what's real, not what you've invested your time and identity subsuming your reality under. Do you see? What's right is what is real. You may find deep help with, doing a vegan lifestyle, but then when you find out that there are essential proteins and fats that are more readily found by having meat too, that's a reality that you have to confront at some point if you want to have the most optimized approach to a healthy lifestyle. You see, that what's true is what wins the day, even with all of the inertial power of groupthink kind of pushing it out to the perimeter. Even in the populist counter messaging to the establishment that's dying, we have to persist in finding the truth and not being so wedded to our tribes that, well, I'm going to stick with this because I picked this team and this is my team for battling the establishment. That doesn't work. We have to be more, savvier and wiser and discerning about this. So we'll pick this up and return after this ABC state-submitted news break. Back in a second.
Politics these days are just that, politics. Pathetic discussions about things that don't matter, while the pandemic, crime, and economic disparity march on. That's why you need a balanced approach to news, business, and entertainment in the state of Florida. That publication is newstalkflorida.com. Whether it's the White House, the courthouse, or your neighbor's house, News Talk Florida has the sources, articles, video, and audio that will be a must daily check-in from your laptop or mobile device. Take a look at newstalkflorida.com. Today's news and entertainment with a Florida slant.
The number of cyber attacks grows. New York's mass transit agency, the latest to report its systems were targeted in April. That, along with the ransomware attacks on JBS meat suppliers and the U.S. major fuel pipeline, those have links to Russia. Elizabeth Newman is an ABC News national security analyst and former DHS Assistant Secretary of Counterterrorism. She calls the attacks a wake-up call.
This is not going away. If it's not in Russia, these criminal gangs are going to operate elsewhere, and they're going to continue attacking because they make money off of it.
The White House says President Biden will raise the issue of cyber attacks at his summit with Russia's leader later this month. President Biden urging Americans to get their COVID-19 shot, making a final push to have 70% of adults partially vaccinated by July 4th. Organizers of the Olympics and Paralympics say 10,000 volunteers have withdrawn from the games as of this week due to COVID concerns. That as calls grow to cancel the games. Michelle Franzen, ABC News.
So what sparked this, I just seen a clip from Brett Weinstein's show, The Dark Horse podcast. He's a biologist, and he was talking about how him and his wife, both of them are biologists, and they've been talking about the gain function lab leak hypothesis out of Wuhan for some time as biologists, looking at the evidence, and they're just pointing out how it wasn't until Nicholas Wade, who we read that story on our show together when it came out on, I think, Substack or Medium, whatever, where he did a story providing the evidence. And since he had prestige socially, having been a writer for the science, running the science beat at the New York Times, I believe, and some other publications, that gave the so-called cocktail crowd the impetus to now say it's cool enough to talk about. And then they were pointing out how people David Frum and so forth who are completely obsessed and worshiping of Donald Trump and everything they think and do, were talking about how it was good that the establishment 20th century legacy media didn't talk about the lab hypothesis because only racists and extremists and freaks who like Trump talked about it, so therefore the cool kids were right to not talk about it. This is lunchroom drama. Do you see how pathetic this all is? On so many different angles here. It's not one side here, but it's this whole thing is a lunchroom drama that is a waste of time for people who want to deal with facts and who want to deal with reality. And, Brett brought up the UFO story, how, in these 60 Minutes show, again, and then Obama on the Tonight Show or whatever, talking about, oh yeah, there's something here or there. And now that's supposed to give the cool crowd the signal that they can now talk about something that they used to deride people for talking about. Right? And so what changed? Did the facts change, or did social context for the facts change? Do you see what I'm getting at? And that's what I want you to think about for other things that you think are unassailable right now. Again, go back to physics. Well, can't touch relativity. The experts already figured out that's a fact. Don't touch it. No, we just found out that one of the key things about what relativity predicts with dark matter in the universe turns out maybe it's not right, right? And so we've been telling you that for a long time. Quantum physics, another thing. Oh, you're not supposed to touch it. Well, that's settled. Don't just move on. Go on. And it's like, no, actually what you're doing is you want to fit in with the cool crowd. Fitting in with the cool crowd is really what dominates what's considered unassailable science today. For so many things. We know this in the climate change story. That climate change story, whatever you want to make of whether it's man-made or whatever, we know that assuming it is man-made, that the answers that they're providing of having some kind of corporatist, top-down globally coordinated campaign where we're going to reward the same actors who've been polluting the planet like crazy to come up with bogus garbage versions of clean energy like biomass waste processors and solar panels and wind farms. These things have a lot of pollution, a lot of environmental destruction, and that they're owned by the same companies who are producing the other dirtier forms of energy. So so even assuming their own argument that the man-made impact is so great that we have to, totally sacrifice freedoms and prosperity and impoverish people and impoverish humanity in catastrophic ways, it's all, even if that's true, their solutions that they're all pointing us towards are totally dead on arrival because they don't want to challenge their epistemology of what the solutions actually can be to stop something like run pollution from harming the planet. So we can't even have a conversation about low temperature nuclear energy, what they used to call cold fusion. Cold fusion has been derided and dismissed by the same fake news little clique, cool kid crowd for almost as long as the UFO story was. And just like the lab leak hypothesis, cool kids said, oh no, you can't talk about it. And so everybody said, okay, we have to be quiet, or else we'll be considered a freak. And then enough evidence piles up. One member of the cool kids says, yeah, lab leak hypothesis, that's where all the evidence is. And they're like, okay, now it's cool to talk about it. So you're retarding scientific progress and information and harming people's lives in many cases when we don't challenge this epistemological hubris that's baked into our society. That's what I want you to think about today as we look at this story, because we could get into the emails and that's what everybody's doing. If you want to have fun with that, that's fine. We can look at that. But I just want to make a bigger point here that's more important. And because I want you to be able to see the lessons we can learn from this and apply them to other areas to say, why are we in the dark ages? Why is it that it's considered fringe to talk about room temperature, tabletop nuclear type energy, right? That's considered, we can't talk about that. Why? Because you have a religious, mimetic devotion and trust in the high priests of science who have told you nuclear fusion has to happen with billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar, 30-year projects to create, massive heat, hotter than the sun or whatever, to create this thing. And it's like, well, maybe we need to rethink that. How do you know that that's the only way to produce nuclear energy? Maybe that's a totally wrong-headed approach. Oh, can't do that because you're going to have people like Dr. Michio Kaku unfortunately telling you, well, you have to assume relativity and quantum physics to have anything in our papers. Okay, well, it sounds like you don't like your model of the Trinity being challenged. You don't like your model of eschatology being challenged, sir. But you don't know that because you operate in a world in which your epistemological hubris is coddled and protected, and therefore you are never exposed to the faulty basis on which you stand. And you know how you get epistemological humility? It's by imitating Jesus. You see, Jesus, not the caricature that people who are jealous of his stature in history would have you believe. They try to make him a caricature. But Jesus provides a role model of how to be suspicious of sacred cows around you. Not just the establishment sacred cows, but also the populist sacred cows that end up being just as wrong as the dominant establishment narratives. And to be guided by looking for evidence, not looking for picking the team that seems to have the most social currency in your clique. Does that make sense? Because that's at the heart of what's going to help push us to a better place culturally. And we have to point this out in a myriad of ways. We have to point it out with humor, with satire. We have to point it out with investigation. We have to point it out with repetition. And we have to point it out by applying this principle of having courage to challenge this knee-jerk feeling we feel to, I shouldn't touch that because experts say. So I shouldn't talk about room temperature, nuclear energy because experts say nuclear fusion is the official thing you're supposed to focus on. Now that's rapidly changing too, but it could have changed a lot long ago if we had just gotten through this social pressure of conformity that holds science back. And again, just to be fair to the side that says you have to screen out for the quacks, that applies for a lot of the alternative proposals for scientific ideas outside of the official narrative that is protected by government and media groupthink. So it's a little complicated, but see what I'm trying to get at. The driving principle is skin in the game. What helps us see these things better is when we have competitive funding for science rather than monopoly funding. Because then we can test what's not working. When people have skin in the game, when they have ownership over the things that they're investing in, and they want to see a return. And it's not all about profit. Sometimes it could be a foundation or a nonprofit that wants to advance an idea. And a lot of that capital would be flowing towards directions in medicine and nutrition and physics and nuclear energy and virology, right? In the study of anti-gravity, whatever, that you could be able to find out if these ideas have merit, because capital would be more decentralized in its flowing to things to try to see what works and what doesn't. That's our price. That's how the market functions in a spontaneous orders effect, where you are able to figure out what actually makes sense. But we don't have that today because government provides this giant monopoly of funding flow, and it creates a politicization of science, and it creates an arrogance cocoon protection that keeps ideas long past their due date because of the prestige of the people who continue to tell you they are unassailable facts or, established science theories that cannot be challenged. We will challenge those bad ideas if they don't make sense, because you have to have the courage to do so. That's the biggest thing in short. That's the thing that's in the shortest supply is courage. If you don't have courage, you have nothing, because that's the only way you can speak against, the momentum of bad ideas and bad policies and things that are not working. And so that's what I hope that we can get out of this moment as we see this news coming out more and more that, Dr. Fauci has been being way too political, way too, loose with his claims, and that this is something that we should have dealt with a lot sooner. But we have to be able to have a kind of foundational framework to know how to get out of this mess in the future, if we're going to have any learning moments from this. So just having, fire that guy, he's a bad guy. Well, that's a small little blip on what needs to be looked at here. The system is bad. It's not people. And the people are fallen. But that's the thing. When you give them a system of power, and then they have a government that can sacrificially exclude and purge ideas and theories and paradigms that don't fit with the power establishment that they're funding, you're not going to be able to know what you don't know. And that's what I'm trying to say. That's the fundamental problem, is that we have an assumption that human beings are innately good, and therefore you can give them all this massive amount of power and they won't, make mistakes. And that's just incorrect, as we're learning painfully so every day. And you think how big it is? Let me tell you something. People are just coming, now the cool kids are saying they're just now coming to the realization, so-called cool kids, right? That this lab leak thing is really the thing that brought this thing out to the public, and 3 million people died. And then you learn what government does to tip the scales against things that are not patented, like ivermectin. You think how many people could have lived if they had been out of the way for that. And these social media sites that are acting as de facto censorship arms for government and their crony friends, they only do so because of their privilege and connection with government, shutting down the Ministry of Health in Brazil's Twitter page when they said take early treatment, or, going after the SAC Ministry of Health or whatever over there for talk on Facebook for talking about ivermectin. And again, there's this taint that, if you say, even when I say ivermectin, I'm like, oh, now I sound like those, like that's what, that's the fringe stuff. You say the word ivermectin. This is a product that's been on the market for a long time. But because it doesn't have this mimetic social conformity of hierarchical authority saying, yes, this is the official thing, CDC tells you, take ivermectin, because they don't have that air of authority, it scares people to make the leap of faith, to do the research to find out if it actually has evidence in the real world of having an effect helpful for people for this COVID thing, right? And that's the difficult thing for folks, is to learn how to have that discernment for all kinds of topics that affect their lives. Like I've told you all the time about seed oils. Again, seed oils subsidized by your government using your money, and subsidize all this nonsense science that creates all this confusion and tells people it's good for your heart health to eat seed oils because they have this faulty hypothesis about dietary consumption of dietary cholesterol from butter and so forth is what's causing heart attacks, because when they looked at these clogged arteries, they saw a lot of cholesterol. And as the analogy I've heard it said, it's like you show up to a fire and you're saying, hey, what caused the fire? I see a bunch of fire trucks everywhere. The fire trucks caused the fire. It's like, no, the cholesterol shows up to try to repair the damage that's caused by what? Inflammation. And inflammation is caused by things like industrial seed oils that your precious government in media, the 20th century media, ABC, CBS, NBC, all those guys, kept pushing your family for decades to eat this stuff, and they put it in almost every product imaginable. And so what happens? It sets people up with all this inflammation. All these comorbidities are skyrocketing because of the increase of seed oil consumption, and even the leukotoxin buildup that people have found in the Frontiers in Physiology papers showing severe cases of COVID are having this high amount of leukotoxin, which is directly caused by the consumption of these omega-6 seed oils. So this is something, again, so many ways to talk about this issue, but how many millions of people have died excruciatingly painful and early deaths because of these comorbidities that could be avoided if we had more decentralized funding flow to find out what actually is the truth about heart attacks. What is the truth about inflammation? What is the truth? Oh, we can only go through one size fits all, one priest, one God. Well, this is sacrificial voodoo nonsense. And this is the topic that drives all of these topics that are causing you unnecessary, stress and fear and economic decline and physical decline and all these different things that shouldn't be happening to the accelerated degree that they're happening. So let's do something about it. Let's talk about it. Let's kickstart a conversation that can revolutionize our approach to epistemology by using an understanding of mimetic theory to give us that insight. I'm David Gronowski. You can email me hello@aneighborschoice.com. Drop a comment on our YouTube stream. Search for David Gronowski on YouTube to find us, and we'll be back in just a moment. Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality, grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a sixth-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR. Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved two people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck in a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender.
Mental illness is up dramatically since the epidemic hit America. Consider this from the Holy Scripture.
Prepare your minds for action, and being sober-minded, set your hope full on the grace that will be brought to you. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 13.
Are you sober-minded? Do you think there's no hope? There is, and it's waiting for you at your local church. There you'll find a healthy mindset that will give you strength and wisdom. The welcoming committee is there waiting for you. See you soon.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. David Gronowski here, your host. 727-587-1040 is the number to call in if you want to join the program. 727-587-1040. Tho Bishop, who is an editor at the Mises Institute, he comments on his social media, when the American people fully recognize that we destroyed the American economy, as the secular saint Dr. Fauci repeatedly lied to us, there will be anger. In response to this anger, the FBI will escalate its war on domestic terror. It will result in further causing pain and damage on the victims of Fauci. Never underestimate the degree to which the federal government hates the American people. As we saw under Trump, the corruption is deeper than anything an election can solve. Any elected Republican that isn't prepared to seriously engage this reality will provide no value to this country. So that is a sentiment that folks have. And I do think there is a tremendous amount of contempt from D.C. to the people that they're supposed to be serving. Like the idea of a public servant is this is a satire on service. And they have contempt. They think that they're better, that their lives have more value than the people that they get to rule over. They're out of touch. They have no accountability. They blame all their problems on their scapegoats. And that's why I think it's clear that, they're setting up this story about Fauci to offload him as a scapegoat, because the state in politics is a scapegoating machine, but it's a scapegoating machine on many different levels. I mean, they scapegoat every time they grab someone in your neighborhood or in your community and cage them like they're violent for a non-violent victimless choice. That's a false accusation by your action. Action speaks louder than words, and when you use action to grab someone and put them in a cage where they can be assaulted physically, you are doing something that is using your actions to bear false witness against your neighbor. You're acting as if they are violent by caging them as if they're violent when they perhaps have done something that's nonviolent that doesn't have a victim. So that's what you see going on one level for scapegoating in the state. But the other way that the state uses scapegoating is when their policies get challenged. Look at what Biden's done for his entire life, 50 years of perpetual occupation of people of color overseas. 50 years of denigrating communities, minority communities, and making them feel marginalized, and then using that as an impetus to create more militarization of the police, more license to cage people recklessly for nonviolent crimes, and to enrich prison industrial complex interests. So he spent that entire time, but what does he do? 50 years of making hell on earth for people. And what does he do? He says, well, it's this white supremacy I'm battling. I'm going to battle it for you. Vote for me, and I'll battle this construct that he's created, rather than recognizing, you know what, I'm the one that helped create this stuff all along. I should repent of it and pardon every person that I helped put in cages. He should provide restitution for all of the loot that he's made with his family based on the scoundrel foreign policy that he's engaged in. Restitution for all the victims worldwide. He'd have nothing left. Every penny would be taken. But see, he doesn't do that. So they obfuscate. But then what happens? Another form of scapegoating is that when policies are exposed, you say, okay, Dr. Fauci, you get to get rid of him, but we're going to keep all the same, ignorant and corrupt bureaucratic processes going behind the scenes. But we get the front man out. That doesn't solve anything. That's like firing the, PR spokesperson who runs a company PR firm. It's not going to solve the problem of the policies. Ron Coleman tweets out, seriously, though, the only reason the government ever complies with a FOIA request is when the person who is going to get burned has been approved to take the fall. That's the real story here. And Sam comments saying, I've been saying the same thing. But that's a take there. But again, that represents how the state machine keeps sacrificially excluding and purging even its own saints and its own priests, because the show must go on. And there's too much momentum with fallen human beings pushing forward for their little fiefdoms, their little kingdoms. And so they say, well, we got to keep going. There's a lot of pressure that this fellow's getting a lot of heat and exposure. Let's say we got rid of him. He was the problem. We're going to, or, whatever, and then try to keep going with the same policies. So we have to be wiser. We have to have a distrust in having this kind of centralized power in the hands of fallen human beings, no matter which party's in power. That's the lesson from this moment. You shouldn't have unaccountable gain of function research doing in a dentist level security lab in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Should be playing God, and then only for the purpose of trying to have a vaccine that you can then patent and so forth. This is so unethical. It's so reckless. Marshall McLuhan, we've had his grandson on, Andrew McLuhan, who runs the McLuhan Institute. Marshall McLuhan was a media theorist, and there's a meme that goes around with a quote from him that says, World War III is a guerrilla information war with no division between military and civilian participation. And I think in some sense that's what we're in today, where there's so much disinformation and so much stuff you can't know what's true, and there's so much confusion. And that's the battle of our time, is to be able to sort out the confusion, have a proper epistemology, and have the humility and the courage at the same time to challenge these assumptions. Because we have to. Our survival depends on challenging fake science and scientism. Christopher comments, they. Is that your pronoun, or what does they mean? But that's it for hour one. We'll continue with hour two in just a moment. I'm David Gronowski, back in just a moment with more news comment. Godspeed.
Your home for news, talk, and information. 1040 WHBO Pinellas Park, Tampa Bay's all new News Talk 1040.
It's the only way I get news.
From ABC News. I'm Michelle Franzen. President Biden designated June a call to action month, trying to get more shots in the arms of Americans.
President Biden aiming at Independence Day to free the nation from all COVID restrictions.
We're announcing a month-long effort to pull all the stops to free ourselves from this virus and get to 70% of adult Americans vaccinated.
Only 12 states reached that goal, with many, most in the South and West, with fewer than half the population vaccinated. Andy Field, ABC News, Washington.
In Israel, opposition party leaders have announced they have reached a coalition deal, the first step in what could be the ouster of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's leader for more than a decade. Yair Lapid, the chair of the centrist political party, says his office informed the president of Israel he succeeded to form a unity government and power-sharing agreement with right-wing party leader Naftali Bennett. That parliament, though, still needs to hold a confidence vote that can happen in the next week. A federal investigation into a drug-running operation in Utah by a major street gang leads to charges.
In a big takedown, federal agents say they seized over 42 pounds of methamphetamine, 7 pounds of heroin, 5,000 fentanyl pills, 15 guns, and tens of thousands of dollars in cash, all part of a 9-month-long investigation into the Norteño gang. Now 32 alleged members and associates of the gang are being charged with attempting to distribute drugs across Utah and then driving the money back to Mexico. Most charged live in Salt Lake City. Others are in California and Mexico. Alex Stone, ABC News.
The world's largest meat supplier, JBS, says the meat plants are back in operation following that weekend cyber attack. The company welcoming its employees back on Facebook pages. Some delays, though, could lead to some supply disruptions. It comes 2 weeks after Russian hackers infiltrated the computer network of a major U.S. fuel pipeline. You're listening to ABC News.
If you have unfiled taxes or are in debt to the IRS, this is important news. The IRS just rolled out a new program to help struggling taxpayers more easily resolve their tax problems. It's called the Taxpayer Relief Initiative, and it opens up powerful new options for people looking to get back on the right track with the IRS. And no one knows this program like the professionals at Optima Tax Relief, America's most trusted tax resolution company. They've resolved over $1 billion in tax debt for their clients and have the expertise and experience to help you. One easy call to Optima can start the process, helping to put an end to your worries of wage garnishment, asset seizure, and other aggressive IRS actions. Make today the beginning of your fresh start with the IRS. Call the experts at Optima Tax Relief now for your free confidential consultation.
Call 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460.
Optima Tax Relief.
Some restrictions apply. For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
Churchill Downs has suspended trainer Bob Baffert for 2 years after Medina Spirit, the winner of the Kentucky Derby, tested positive on another drug test. The Kentucky Horse Racing Commission still completing its investigation and may decide to strip Medina Spirit of its Derby win. A published report could reignite the recent debate over the British royal family and race.
The Guardian reports the Queen's senior staff banned ethnic minority immigrants from serving in clerical positions. Policy, the paper says, which was followed until at least the late 60s. It's unclear when exactly the practice ended, but records show those with ethnic minority backgrounds were being employed at the palace in the 1990s.
ABC's Tom Rivers. A record number of women are now on the annual Fortune 500 list.
Fortune has released its annual Fortune 500 list of the country's largest companies, and a record-breaking 41 of those companies have female CEOs. The highest-ranking company with a female CEO was number 4 on the list, CVS Health, led by Karen Lynch. And for the first time, 2 black women are running Fortune 500 companies, Roz Brewer of Walgreens and Thasunda Brown Duckett of TIAA. Mark Remillard, ABC News.
It's not just states in the U.S. offering incentives to get the COVID vaccine. The mayor of a farming town near Manila in the Philippines is promising to raffle off a cow each month. This is ABC News.
It's all about the nose. It's your air filter, the first line of defense against bacteria and viruses. If too many germs get stuck in your nose, guess what? You get sick. That's why it's so important to keep your nose clean, just like washing your hands. Now there's a better way to keep your nose clean and help your body protect itself. It's called Navage Nasal Care. Navage uses powered suction to flush out allergens, mucus, bacteria, and viruses. At Navage.com, CVS, Walgreens, Bed Bath, Target, and Rite Aid. Navage, Navage.
I'm Michelle Franzen, ABC News.
Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a 6th-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR. From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gronowski. Welcome back to the program. Let's look at some of the comments. We see Ben says, this correspondence offers a rare glimpse into Fauci's frantic schedule and polite, to-the-point demeanor. That's a quote. The tweet from my local ABC affiliate is laughable, Ben says. And I agree. That's how pathetic this 20th century approach to media continues to look in the 21st century. We can now see how pathetic it really looks. But this is how narratives have been being manipulated and shaped for so long. It's great that we are finally recognizing it in this digital context where we can kind of compare it to the facts and realize, wait a second, this is just not accurate. Jack Posobiec, who's a journalist at Human Events, or he's a commentator, he says, or he quotes the CNN headline on Twitter saying, thousands of emails from and to Dr. Fauci reveal the weight that came with his role as a rare source of frank honesty within the Trump administration's COVID-19 task force. And Jack Posobiec said, did the CCP write this headline? But again, it's one thing to say, well, anything that we don't like about our government, well, that's just some other foreign country that made them write the headline. But at the end of the day, we have a faulty system. This top-down, micromanaged, state-submitted approach to media and information is just totally out to lunch. I mean, the idea that you can have a media where they're saying, oh yeah, thousands of emails from and to Fauci reveal the weight that came with his role and a rare source of frank honesty. No, that's not the headline. That's the headline for people who want to create a narrative that suits their interests rather than suits the facts. It's totally insane. We have we have to move past this. We have to. It's so important. The National Pulse reports COVID looks engineered. Government-funded immunologist told Fauci in January 2020. This is Christian Anderson, the head of the Anderson Lab at Scripps Research Institute in California, told Dr. Fauci in late January 2020 that unusual features of the COVID-19 virus led him to believe it was potentially engineered. The bombshell release from Dr. Fauci's emails goes to disprove the political and media establishment's claims that lab leak or bioweapon concerns were conspiracy theories. In fact, Anderson is a government-funded scientist backed by Fauci's own colleagues at the National Institutes for Health. He wrote on Friday, January 31st, 2020, at 10:32 p.m. on a phylogenetic tree. The virus looks totally normal, and the close clustering with bats suggests that bats serve as the reservoir. The unusual features of the virus make up a really small part of the genome at 0.1%. So one has to look really close at all of the sequences to see that some of the features potentially look engineered. Shortly after sending the email, Anderson changed his perspective and has gone to great lengths to distance himself from his original thesis. Nonetheless, the email proves that an engineered virus theory was at the heart of the U.S. government and scientific community right from the outset. The news comes as the National Pulse can report that Fauci refused to read emails about how China was hiding data. Fauci advised Obama staffers to not wear masks. Fauci engaged in gain-of-function discussions. The emails also show that Fauci accepted that asymptomatic spread did not really exist. he says, I guess this email says from Dr. Fauci, error in my statement to you. I meant to say that, quote, most transmissions occur from someone who is symptomatic, not asymptomatic. I am really tired, not much sleep these days. Best, Tony. So, again, they heightened all of this stuff about, oh my goodness, asymptomatic spread. There really wasn't a lot of evidence suggesting that, but it helped with, trying to funnel people into, doing exactly what they wanted them to do. And that top-down authoritarian 20th century model of scientism has got to go. It's totally holding us back and harming our families on so many levels. It's just toxic. JustTheNews.com reports Fauci's upcoming book scrubbed on Amazon, Barnes & Noble amid backlash. Book will allegedly offer universal advice to live by. Isn't that Jordan Peterson's line on his book, advice, rules to live by? White House coronavirus advisor and longtime U.S. infectious disease expert Dr. Fauci's upcoming book has been scrubbed from and altered on online listings amid criticism that he is profiting from the deadly COVID-19 pandemic. The book, Expect the Unexpected, was earlier pegged for a November release, according to its Amazon listing. As of Wednesday morning, the book's listing has been entirely scrubbed from Amazon. However, a version of the listing still displayed the book's promotional description and pre-order status. The book appears to still be available for pre-order on some lesser-known vendors such as Booktopia. The scrubbing of the book comes after backlash from critics who accuse Fauci of profiting off of the deadly pandemic, the U.S. response to which he has overseen. If you look at the numbers again, you had Cuomo profiting off a pandemic, a government official, said Concha, a media reporter for the Hill newspaper. Now we have Fauci doing it as well. I think this is appalling. Well, it is appalling, but that's what worshiping the state in the 21st century produces. A lot of appalling, disgusting avarice and wickedness in high places. I mean, that's the whole point. And it seems like the left and right, they don't want to hear that message in terms of the ones who are politically interested. All they want to hear about is, I got to get the power, because once I get the power, my people will figure it out. I mean, I've had guests on here and ones that will come out in the future. And you hear, that people say, we just need to get the right people into these top-down centralized models of government, and then that'll get it all done. It won't get it done. You need to get these ivory towers out of these monopolies of government bureaucracy out of our sense making. It's not working. And I want to go dive into this story about the Fauci privately advised Obama staffers to not wear masks, saying not effective. That's the National Pulse story on this. Dr. Fauci advised Obama-era Health and Human Services Secretary Sylvia Burwell against wearing a mask, even slamming the practice as not really effective. In private emails obtained via a Freedom of Information Act request, Burwell, also the former director of President Barack Obama's Office of Management and Budget, emailed the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Disease director on February 4th, 2020, inquiring about the necessity of wearing a mask for a forthcoming trip and advice on the direction of a donation to China from investor Ray Dalio. She says, Tony, 2 questions. I'm traveling to blank. Folks are suggesting that I take a mask for the airport. Is this something I should do? The following day, Fauci's response included a declaration that I do not recommend that you wear a mask, adding that the typical mask you buy in the drugstore is not really effective in keeping out the virus. So, again, they were telling us we have to all wear the mask, and then they said, and then at first he said, don't wear a mask, right? And then he said, well, I just said that so that all the workers could get, their masks, the health workers could get their masks first, so there was no shortage. But then you see him in these emails telling people, yeah, that's not really effective. Why couldn't he have told us this? Why did you have to stoke political groupthink tribalism? Why? Why do we have to tolerate this shoddy, low-quality embarrassment for science? Why do we have to have top-down one-size-fits-all, central command, 20th century authoritarian-style scientism instead of science. We have got to just totally reject this entire paradigm for how we do science. It's not about, electing Trump or whoever. He sat there and let that guy do that while he was in office. So if that's the real answer, it didn't work. That's not the answer. The answer is us rethinking what we expect about what science should look like. Let's hear what the CDC says. One size fits all policy for everybody. No ability to have a discourse. No ability to have debate. A social media post says, honestly, it's pretty blank and funny that just a couple of weeks ago, after Fauci told Rand Paul that Ralph Barrick's lab doesn't do gain-of-function work, it comes out that he emailed Barrick's 2015 paper to his deputy and titled it, quote, SARS gain-of-function.pdf. And this is another email in this Freedom of Information disclosure. It's just insane in this stuff. And again, the media just is constantly lying and lying and lying. Oh, we didn't want to cover this story because only extremists and people were covering. No, that's not true. A lot of very high quality scientists and researchers and journalists of different political persuasion were all talking about this and have talked about it. They just have a particular theology of worshiping government, and they want a certain brand of it. Politically correct, garbed, heavy military, extended style government. That's the kind of government that the old 20th century media loves to promote at all costs. And they simply cannot stand anybody who challenges that type of government's credibility. And so they just gaslight and lie and bully. That's what the media does the best. They bully all the time. And people's lives are lost. This is not a joke. This is not an exaggeration. Huge loss of life that didn't need to happen. The government still won't tell you the truth about seed oils. The media won't tell you the truth about seed oils and how they're driving the comorbidities and the leukotoxin, which causes cases of this severe immune response to COVID. They still don't want to tell you the full information about what they know and when they knew it as regards to the Wuhan Institute of Virology's role in this lab leak that led to this virus causing so much havoc. They still don't want to talk about the shoddy science claims they made about masks and social distancing and sanitization. They're just wrong on so many levels. But what are we going to do about it is the question, right? Are we just going to go around and elect these, all we're going to do, just vote for Republicans or whatever, Libertarian Party, whatever it is? Or are we going to use this as a cultural change where we start building new institutions of scientific knowledge and research and media and conversations, and then acting out on that information and changing our lives accordingly when it suggests that we should, like removing these toxic vegetable oils. That's just one example that we're going to continue to talk about. We'll take a break and return. I'm David Gronowski, 727-587-1040, the number to call, or drop a comment on our YouTube stream. Back in a second. David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck on a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa.
Not attorney spokeswoman.
Neighbor's Choice returns. Let's look at some of your comments here. I got an email from a listener named James. His question, what do you think, if anything, Jordan Peterson gets wrong? Do you think he's too focused on the individual like some classic liberals? Both of you are in my top 5 in terms of weekly consumption, and I just wondered today if you disagree substantively with anything he teaches, though not looking to start any beef. And to that I would say, I interviewed Jordan Peterson, when he had his book 12 Rules for Life come out. I did a video interview with him in person in New York City, and on the day of the book release, and we had a great discussion. And I was explaining my premise of the interview was, you're looking at a lot of these things through the lens of, say, Carl Jung with this individual psychological approach. And I think that, Rene Girard's approach to Jesus, when he's looking at the historical Jesus, not just the archetype of a Jesus as a mythic frame, but actually as a historical person that we have to reckon with. And and Girard's looking at how the gospel stories affected our modern world and the way we think of the world, and our approach to finding victims to be innocent rather than assuming them to be guilty and condemned as they were in the past when Jesus arrived into the scene of history. And so I was trying to get Dr. Peterson to see that mimetic theory actually provides more of a robust intellectual toolkit to get at some of the ideas that he's getting by way of, folks like Carl Jung. Not to say I studied Carl Jung when I was in college too, and I found him to be helpful. And if you watch a recent Things Hidden film that we did on aneighborschoice.com, you can see a campfire discussion with 2 friends of mine, Shannon and Shane. And Shane brings out some ideas about Carl Jung around the campfire in our discussion that shows how perhaps there is some real ability to integrate the psychological insights of Jung with the social and anthropological insights of Rene Girard, that they don't have to be completely in tension. But I do think if you take more of a psychological approach only, without deconstructing the desires that we have, like the Bible does, And if we don't look at the historical, real, historical Jesus, instead of just making it an abstract thing, if we don't look at the real historical Jesus, then we can't see how gospel acts as a technology to deconstruct the ways in which societies had meaning in the past and how we're still clinging to sacrificial violence to hold up our institutions of knowledge and sense-making in our time today. As I've just tried to, I don't talk about mimetic theory. It's kind of funny. I do these interviews on different people's programs, and that's where I get into, kind of the mechanics of the theory. But on this show, A Neighbor's Choice, we're doing broadcast, and I try to focus more on news topical format rather than, deep discourse into these ideas. But we try to apply this gospel technology idea in the real time with the news that we look at. So yeah, it's a great question. And he also asks, I've been reading I See Satan Fall Like Lightning, which is a book by Rene Girard. And he says, and I love it. Do you have any recommendations as to what to order for Girard's books? And there's a lot of good stuff. I like Evolution and Conversion by Rene Girard, which is really good. Things Hidden Since the Foundation of the World is a big epic book of his. Another one that's good is his book on Job, which talks about how Job was most likely a persecuted king who was being basically ganged up on by his court of advisors, so-called friends, who were all trying to get him to basically admit that he's the scapegoat. And that's exactly goes back to the news story of our day, where it's like everybody's like, oh yeah, finally Fauci might be getting some scrutiny. And it's like, well, that's good, but don't forget that there's probably a whole cadre of groupthink folks who are kind of in the bureaucracy on different levels saying, well, yeah, let's just kind of push him out to take the hit as the scapegoat so that we can keep doing our thing without having our rice bowl overturned and our ignorance exposed and our egregious negligence on level of criminality, perhaps, that goes to so many different levels of government and its bureaucracy mismanaging every level of this virus. And they continue to do so. And the folks who get bold about the gain of function thing are not bold about other parts of the mismanagement that government continues to do in this situation. You see? So it's a complicated thing. But we got to sort through it all. We have to sort through it all as best as we can. Reuters reports Israel sees probable link between Pfizer vaccine and myocarditis. I may be saying that wrong. I didn't check the pronunciation of this before I read the headline. So Israel's health ministry said on Tuesday it had found the small number of heart inflammation cases observed mainly in young men who received Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine in Israel were likely linked to their vaccination. So here's the thing. If a young man, why does a young man need to be pushed into taking a product with all this extreme amount of pressure from every Hollywood star and every music star and every government thing? You got to get it. 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 And it's like, as a young person that will, if he's probably not been eating a vast amount of government subsidized seed oils for decades and decades, and if they're in relative good shape and health wise, they're not going to have a horrible experience with this virus. And the natural immunity that they get from having had the virus probably provides a better robust defense than the immunity given to them by a Pfizer shot. So now these people have this heart inflammation that they didn't need to have if people would stop being so stupid and cavalier with their idiotic groupthink pressure imposing itself onto our scientific process. It's absolutely repulsive to me. This whole thing it's like watching this giant train wreck continually happen in slow motion, and you're trying to do your best to get people out of the way, and it's just exhausting to look at error after error after error and try to navigate this thing and sort out the inundation of groupthink nonsense. That why are these young people getting this vaccine and getting heart inflammation? But that's okay because it's better that one person is sacrificed for the greater good, which happens to be sponsored by Pfizer. Okay, sounds good. This is so stupid that grown adults believe this kind of drivel. But we have to sort it out together, And hopefully we can make it through the madness and have a better society on the other side. Back in just a moment.
There is all kinds of lunacy going on. The madness of 2020.
Weekdays 11 to 2.
I'm just so fed up with these Democrats. It's unbelievable.
Get it straight from Chris Plant.
They're so hypocritical. It makes me sick.
It's the Chris Plant Show.
This has just got me going off.
And the left is waging war against the police in the United States.
Telling it like it is.
You should be thanked profusely for getting to the point. You're a voice of reason in the sea of idiots.
The Chris Plant Show. Weekdays 11 to 2. News Talk 1040 WHPO.
A new sales pitch to try to boost COVID vaccinations, combining two words that make for one powerful concept: free beer.
Anheuser-Busch announced that beer is on them on July the 4th. That's right. Get a shot and have a beer. Free beer for everyone 21 years or over to celebrate the independence from the virus.
President Biden, the giant brewer Anheuser-Busch, promises free drinks to anyone the day the U.S. reaches 70% of Americans with one COVID shot. Mr. Biden's goal is July 4th. The president declaring June a national month of action for more vaccinations so folks can enjoy what he's calling a summer of freedom. The world's largest meat processing company, JBS Foods, has resumed most production after a weekend cyber attack. Repeating this call, Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Costa Rica meeting with regional leaders.
The United States has made clear, and I'll say it again, that people should not make the dangerous journey to our border.
Chuck Severson, ABC News.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. David Gornowski here, your host. So that story, Pfizer said in a statement that it was aware of the Israeli observations of myocarditis and said no causal link to its vaccine had been established. It said as adverse events are thoroughly reviewed and Pfizer meets regularly with the Vaccine Safety Department of the Israeli Ministry of Health to review data. In Israel, 275 cases of myocarditis, this heart inflammation, were reported between December 2020 and May 2021 among more than 5 million vaccinated people. The ministry said in disclosing the findings of a study it commissioned to examine the matter. Most patients who experienced heart inflammation spent no more than 4 days in the hospital. Goodness, so you got young men spending 4 days in the hospital with heart inflammation because they took this experimental emergency approved vaccine and they were pressured into doing so by every major government and media voice. This is such a disgrace to medical ethics. This is a joke. It is an embarrassment that this kind of stuff, that these people, where's their recourse? They can't sue these companies, these multi-billion-dollar companies. Right? That's part of the deal. You get pressured into taking something, you have no liability, you have no recourse. Young people, articles, they only spent, around 4 days or so in the hospital. Goodness gracious, with heart inflammation? Oh, and that's just the start of it. What does that do long term? And then folks will say, well, again, they have a sacrificial mindset that underlies their worship of statism. Because they'll say, folks, if they even get to this point of self-awareness where they think about it, those who are lapping up the TV programming for groupthink conformity. But if they have the moment to say, well, man, that's bad, they'll say, well, it's better. They had to sacrifice for the greater good so that we can all go back to normal. And it's like, well, that didn't have to happen. You didn't have to have a lawless, reckless government funding a dentist-level lab to do gain-of-function research that unleashed this plague. You didn't have to have Nancy Pelosi denigrating the idea of shutting down travel with China because of an opportunity to get political favor. You didn't have to have so many of the things that we continually have to put up with that cause so much unnecessary loss of life and liberty and mental health and so on and so forth. You didn't have to have a government that continually tells you to eat seed oils and subsidizes them and makes them so cheap that almost every restaurant you know is cooking and serving you food with these processed, oxidized, inflammatory as hell chemicals. Don't have to have it. You don't have to put up with this hellhole. You can demand a better life, and that starts with the choices that you make. It's not demanding politicians to change your life for you. You've got to change it. And that means saying sayonara to failing institutions like 20th century media and 20th century Prussian-style education models called schooling. That's what public school is based on. That's why I just don't accept, we've had guests on talking about, oh yeah, let's ban critical theory from public school. And it's like, I want to get people out of government school completely. It is founded on a fundamentally antithetical model to the American spirit, which is individual liberty, innovation, ingenuity. And they're trying to use a Prussian model and say, oh, well, we don't like how the Prussian model is now using critical theory. It's like, you got to think bigger picture than just a kind of reactionary approach. Parker, there's a screenshot of a conversation between Coca-Cola and a customer. I guess a customer named Parker says, I think Coke casually dropped a singular they into that ad. And Coca-Cola responded, yes, glad you noticed, Parker. We value and celebrate diversity, heart, on their Twitter page. And then there's a story below it. Coca-Cola accused of funding Colombian death squad. Coca-Cola was accused of hiring hitmen from a prominent paramilitary group between 1990 and 2002 to kill at least 10 trade union leaders. It's like, what the heck? I don't know the details on that story, but it's like that's the kind of nonsense that we have, where it's like people do all these gestures to act like they are so sensitive to the concerns for victims, but yet they're still doing a lot of bad stuff. St. Justin Martyr has a quote. He was within 100 to 165 AD. He says, we used to hate and destroy one another and refuse to associate with people of another race or country. Now, because of Christ, we live together with such people and pray for our enemies. That's why I say all the time that political correctness and its more radical fundamentalist mutation, McWokeism, is a cheap imitation of the real thing, Christianity. Christianity is what provided this framework that we are swimming in, the fishbowl of our culture, so to speak. That we pray for our enemies, that we live together with people of different backgrounds, from different countries. This is from Christianity's influence that we have these values. And that's why it's important to push back against right-wing attempts to try to stop those things. At the same time, we have to push back against left-wing attempts that try to weaponize those values in an artificial way, using the state to subsidize mass migration by promising desperate people who our own government has had a foreign policy that destroyed their local countries. So they say their lives are ruined because of our DC establishment that acts like they're so politically correct, but they continually do policies and rigged trade deals and all kinds of interventions that oppress folks in other countries. So then they leave those countries to try to go to our country because those same politicians, like Biden, like Obama, like whatever the media tells you to cheer for, those same politicians promise you, come over here. We've ruined your, they don't say it this way, but this is the reality. They've ruined their country, but they say, come to my country and I will give you rest. I will give you comfort. I will give you all the delight you can imagine. Free education, free schooling, free opportunities for health care in different ways, infrastructure, world-class infrastructure, right? You'll get all the good stuff, better access to jobs and so forth. Come here and I'll take care of you. And then they come over here. So that is a mutation and a perversion of the fundamentally Christian insight to have compassion for the other. So see how hard it is to be a Christian in this world. You have to reject. It's not that hard, but it's hard in terms of entering in a real Christian conversation like I'm doing in a public domain of broadcast news talk radio. You have to navigate this paradoxical way of looking at the world where you can't err on the side of going back to a pagan approach where you say, oh, no, our group and everybody else's group get out. That's a pagan approach. It's not going to work. That's why the right loses so much, because they lead with that kind of rhetoric sometimes and it doesn't work. But the other side is you can't adopt the neoconservative fake concern for victims approach of having these engineered mass migration for the benefit of giant corporations to take advantage of them and giant government bureaucracy to consolidate power by trying to bring in more folks who are enticed by the proposals and promises that they make. So you see, either side has a trap in the dialectic. It's Christianity that allows us to escape dialectic and to embrace the paradox of wise living. That's something we need more of, don't you think? That's something that we need to have more in our conversation today. Barack Obama says in Daily Star, they report, proof of aliens will lead to new religions and massive military spending. I guess, does he want to be involved in that new religion that he's imagining? Talk about the sky parting, the moon crashing into the sea, and the oceans rising, and he will come and save the world. Remember that? He said, it's interesting. He was asked what he thought would happen if we could prove there were aliens probing the earth, but were unable to make contact with them or interact with them. It wouldn't change my politics at all, because my entire politics is premised on the fact that we are these tiny organisms on this little speck floating in the middle of space. Well, if that's the case, Barack Obama, that sounds very eloquent, very Carl Sagan-esque, right? It's like, well, if that's the case, why'd you have to use this little speck of dust in the galaxy to do all these bloody coups like in Libya and Syria? I mean, how shameful is that? That's the thing about these folks that are really the media's darlings. They've got great rhetoric, right? You'd say, wow, that's so eloquent, so thoughtful. Why couldn't you apply some of that thoughtfulness that is supposed to be in that rhetoric to reality? Why couldn't you have actually kept your word and stopped the wars and brought the troops home? You didn't do any of that. And that's why it's just so disappointing. It's like, and folks will try to make excuses. Well, it's just one person up against a machine. Well, then he should say that. He shouldn't embrace and enable the machine. He shouldn't weaponize the machine and weaponize elements of the FBI and so forth to go after his opponents. I mean, it's so upside down. Obama says, but no doubt there would be immediate arguments about like, well, we need to spend a lot more money on weapon systems to defend ourselves. New religions would pop up. Well, that's interesting. I've seen in this line about these government disclosures about so-called UFOs, UAPs. They keep saying, well, this might challenge people's religions. And that's an interesting thought, isn't it, right? Why is that being proposed so much, this idea, thrown into the discourse? Oh, it's going to challenge people's religions. What's the basis for that being a thing? But of course, he talks about, oh, this will be an excuse for more military spending. But I mean, what was your excuse, Barack Obama? You kept spending massively on regime change chaos around the world. The Arab Spring, that was a disaster. What was your excuse? You didn't need aliens to do that, did you? So maybe instead of trying to come up with some kind of eloquent explanation, why couldn't you have come up with eloquent actions? And why is it that the media only presents us with people to emulate who do horrible, dastardly things to perpetuate the status quo of corrupt crony capitalists and warmongers, but then they use soaring rhetoric to remind us of how sweet and nice they are. That's the problem that humanity has been bedeviled by for thousands of years. We're just bedazzled by rhetoric and myths and narratives. And those things distract us from the deep and hard reality of ending our love affair with sacrificial violence. Barack Obama could have challenged nonviolent crimes like Ron Paul did. He could have challenged the empire like Ron Paul did, but then he wouldn't have been able to sit at the seat of power. He wouldn't get the media fawning like he did. He wouldn't get on Ellen's show and all the cocktail parties, and everybody, all the cool kids wouldn't have liked him if he went along and actually did like a Ron Paul wanted to do and really challenge the empire and challenge Wall Street. And so that's the story of human nature, is that we always end up settling to fit in and act like we're change agents rather than actually being the change agents that we need to be. And that's the question we all have to wrestle with in our time. Are we going to be an Obama and just go along with the cool kids, go along with the status quo of violence and bad medicine and bad banking and bad foreign policy and bad ethics and bad justice system corruption, and then get all the Netflix specials? Or are we going to be like a Ron Paul who came and have his channel, be viewed without social media censorship, but he consistently gets out there and speaks truth to power? People are bedazzled by the power. They're bedazzled by fame. They're bedazzled by that temptation to just be considered cool and acceptable. And so they compromise so many different ways in their life. And before you know it, they've gained the whole world, but they've lost their soul. So we need to raise up role models that we can emulate that keep the truth and still have some kind of influence to some degree, so that they can be role models that other people can imitate in their own life. We have this kind of mindset that success and truth cannot go hand in hand. And I don't think that has to be. Do you think so? That the only way you can have success is you have to sell out like a Barack Obama. If you want your Netflix specials, I'm not saying that those outlets would give you the red carpet. I'm just saying in terms of, if you want to have influence, you have to compromise and be an agent of the establishment while acting like you're a change agent. I don't know if that's actually correct. Maybe you can keep your convictions. Maybe you can keep telling the truth and make a difference. I think that's true. We'll take a break and return with more. I am David Gronowski. Back in a moment. Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality, grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a 6th-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR. Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved 2 people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents. The law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa.
Not attorney spokeswoman.
Neighbor's Choice returns. You can email me hello@aneighborschoice.com. I want to look at this story by Dr. Kate Shanahan. We've had her on the program recently on our podcast. Just search for David Gornosky on your favorite podcast platform, and you can have access to our daily A Neighbor's Choice radio show, as well as our weekly, sometimes a couple times a week, Things Hidden podcast, as well as our science, our health and nutrition interviews. We got so many stuff. It's hard to keep up with all the content, isn't it? I mean, I just want to create as much content as possible to investigate the truth with all these great people, and you included, and let's just see what happens. Let's just see what happens when we put out the good work and we research and we think out loud together and we invite other people to do the same. But I want to get to this story. There's so many stories. I'm not going to be able to get everything today. But I thought, instead of getting to some, we've done a lot of high concept stuff today, haven't we? So I think it's time to do some practical for just a little bit. And I think it's all the same, it's all practical, but let's just kind of take the plane down to something that can help people. Dr. Kate Shanahan says, should I take fish oil supplements, benefits and harms? This is an article she has on drkate.com, published recently. And you should check it out. I'm not going to get to the whole thing, but I just want to share this with you. Why should I take, because I get a lot of folks who know, because they listen to my show and they realize, my goodness, these vegetable oils are awful. This high omega-6 linoleic acid that's found in canola, safflower, sunflower, that some of the olive oils that you get are laced with these bad oils. So you got to watch out for that. The chicken and the pork that you get at grocery stores and restaurants is got lots of this linoleic acid, omega-6 fat. And then you get all this other stuff. So then there's this popular thing about, well, we got to get, fish oil to up our omega-3 to offset the problem with omega-6. And so a lot of people ask me, what about the fish oils, right? So this story that Dr. Kate has put together kind of deals with this. She deals with topics like, why should I take fish oil? Is fish oil hype? Is fish oil even safe? The one thing you need to see on any fish oil supplement label before buying it, healthy people can make their own fish oil. So the bottom line is, it's not just hype. Fish oil's supposed benefits are not completely fraudulent claims because there is some basis in reality. It is totally true that omega-3 fats represent a family of nutrients our body requires that cannot make on its own. So we need to eat, drink, or otherwise consume these nutrients in order to be healthy, she says. If we don't, we'll be deficient in nutrients and by definition malnourished. When we're nutrient deprived and malnourished, all kinds of things can go wrong with our health. Conversely, if we are malnourished and have developed any of the many medical problems that develop due to lack of the omega-3 family of fatty acids and suddenly start getting plenty, then that one change can reverse many medical problems. This is why the many health claims made by fish oil supplement companies are not complete fiction. Unfortunately, the reality of fish oil supplementation does not come close to the potential. The reason you should not take most fish oil supplements, the sad truth is that most fish oil supplements are actually bad for you. Multiple studies show that fish oil supplements are loaded with toxins. You may think I'm talking about environmental toxins like PCBs or mercury and other pollutants. Those are in fish too, but that's not what I'm talking about. The kind of toxins I'm talking about are actually more harmful than heavy metals and PCBs. We have to consider that fish oil is a processed food product. We're not necessarily getting that special omega-3 family of fatty acids that we think we're getting when we're taking fish oil instead of eating oily fish. It has to do with the impact of processing on the omega-3 family of fats. These toxins are not environmental pollutants and don't exist in fish. After processing, they are present in fish oil in much greater quantities than any environmental pollutants, which makes these toxins a more serious threat to your health. If fish oil supplements contained fish oil in the form that nature made it, fish oil supplements truly could work well to alleviate numerous ailments. The reason most fish oil supplements not only fail to show benefits when studied and may do you more harm than good is that very few fish oil supplements contain fish oil in the form that nature made it. What do I mean by that? Dr. Kate says, fish oil undergoes a chemical change during processing. The omega-3 fatty acids in oily fish are very fragile, and the process of extracting oil from fish damages the oil. The chemical fragility of omega-3 fatty acids presents a manufacturing challenge that is not easily surmounted, and only a few companies currently appear to make the effort to mitigate those technical challenges. The rest are selling fish oil supplements that are actually more likely to be harmful to your health than beneficial. The chemical challenge fish oil manufacturers face is called oxidation. Oxidation is the reason fish oil supplementation has not lived up to expectations. Oxidation transforms the beneficial omega-3 into toxins. This poses two problems to you, the consumer. First, oxidation destroys the beneficial omega-3 fatty acids, not all of them, but a lot of them. This loss of omega-3 occurs during the normal heating and refining steps that most manufacturers employ to make their fish. Second, oxidation creates toxins. Oxidation chemically changes the beneficial compounds, creating new ones that don't exist in fish and in some cases wouldn't exist without the heating and refining steps of processing. Oxidizing fish oil creates many hundreds of new compounds that simply don't exist to any measurable level in the fish, some of which are extremely toxic. Unless you know what to look for, any fish oil supplement you buy is very likely to contain unacceptable high levels of toxic breakdown products of fish oil with known cell-killing, telomere shortening, mitochondrial and microbiome damaging, as well as DNA mutating properties. This makes most fish oil supplements worse than a waste of money. They really should not be available to consumers because they're loaded with toxins. She says the one thing you need to see on any fish oil supplement label before buying it is the actual technology they use is called supercritical extraction with carbon dioxide. That's a mouthful and it's not just hype. Actually, that's a real thing. They use carbon dioxide that they pump in to the processing environment to replace the oxygen normally present in the air. That's one way you can control oxygenation reactions. You just remove the oxygen. If your metabolism is healthy, your body can make so-called fish oil. Not all omega-3 is created equal, she says. So she's saying just remove the omega-6s, and that's a huge benefit. And be careful about a lot of these fish oils. So you can check out this article. It's drkate.com, drcate.com, where you can learn more about it. But that's what we try to do. We try to provide you with a framework of epistemology today. We try to provide an insight into mimetic desire, into scapegoating, into getting past the hubris of our time, being skeptical about groupthink, and then we try to give you some insights that you can take home, like avoiding some of these omega-3 fish oil products. I'm David Gronowski. Email me hello@aneighborschoice.com. Godspeed.